The Miami GP was the fourth race out of 5 venues where Red Bull had a dominant 1-2 finish, with Melbourne being the one that saw Perez start P20 and climb up to P5. This was a feat that not many teams had been able to complete ever since the sport was founded back in 1950. Nonetheless, this goes on to show a harsh reality for the sport, and while Red Bull is more than happy that everything is going in their direction, Miami has revealed something that will make the sport lose tons of fans. The direction in which Formula One is currently moving is definitely not a positive one, and to make things worse, it seems like things will only get worse from this point on. Red Bull has been the only team that has managed to understand the technical regulations shake-up from 2022, and they haven't struggled a single bit with their 2022 and 2023 challenges. When the rest of the grid was angry and furious about fixing the porpoising phenomenon, Red Bull was able to rely on the genius minds of Adrian Newey and Pierre Wash, which resulted in Verstappen's dominant 15-win season in 2022. Now it seems like the same scenario is about to happen, and if you've been a fan of the sport for quite some time, you'd know one thing: F1 is never interesting when there is only one team dominating. But why do we think that Red Bull doesn't have, and won't have, a competition, even with the FIA potentially tweaking the rules because Mercedes asked them to before 2026? For starters, the only driver who was close to challenging Verstappen's reign was Perez. This is the number one issue with Formula One right now. The team itself is dominant, but there is only one driver that is able to extract the maximum out of the RB19. Yes, Perez has been able to win 2 out of the 5 races, with him standing up to Verstappen in Baku and Jeddah. But these are circuits that he used to dominate last year as well. Miami was also a street circuit, and yet Perez lost the lead to Verstappen, who started P9 and went on to do faster laps on 40-lap hard tyres compared to Perez's new medium tyres. The competition that Verstappen has at this moment is pretty much non-existing, and whenever the RB19 shows up in the other driver's rear mirrors, all they do is just stand aside and make no moves whatsoever, implying that they are already giving up on battling the monstrous speed that Red Bull's 2023 Challenger has presented. We've seen an era being dominated by one team in the past, from 2014 to 2020. However, at least we were given a season in which both of its drivers fought for the win, and the less favoured one won in 2016. As all things stand, Perez won't even be able to compete with Verstappen further down the road because some old new issues in terms of tyre degradation and car preferences have strangely appeared after he won in Baku. Even Red Bull's rivals feel like what Verstappen did in Miami was something too easy, and if there is one thing that this will definitely do to the sport, it's repelling old and new viewers. In times where Formula One has struggled massively to gain new market share in the USA, you have a dominance out of a team that has one of the most hated drivers in the world, Max Verstappen, for the way he won the 2021 championship. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it, quite the contrary, but the controversy around it will always remain as it is, and with the cheating budget cap in 2021 and the penalty imposed on Red Bull, something we'll talk about later in this video, it seems like the teams will be encouraged to spend more money than they should, because the penalty certainly doesn't fit the crime. Fernando Alonso has spoken about Verstappen's dominance in Mexico and how he feels about Verstappen breezing past other drivers and making a double overtake at one point of the race, when he was able to pass both Magnussen and Leclerc on the short main straight DRS zone. When talking about it, the Spaniard said, "At the moment it is hard to keep them behind, and I was hoping that he had like a DRS train of cars in front of him, but he was just making moves, one after the other, and the guys in front, they were not in the DRS either. So it was a little bit too easy for him. Hopefully next time we try between all of us to make things more difficult." To compare this to Mercedes, we've seen how much time Hamilton spent behind the DRS train at P13, and this has been the effect of the FIA shortening the DRS zones. While the governing body has aimed to reduce Red Bull's dominance with shorter DRS zones, therefore making their advantage present on a smaller amount of road, it has massively backfired, as they now have cars that cannot pass each other due to them not having enough power with an open DRS. So instead of more passing, they just made the DRS tunnel an even more annoying thing, something that Red Bull doesn't struggle with because their dominance is on another level. Now, why do I think that Perez won't stand a chance in the fight against Verstappen? It all started after the qualifying session, when Perez said that the number one thing Verstappen does better than him is drive the race with more confidence. This is a crucial thing if you want to be competitive against a two-time world champion that always pushes a car to the maximum. And the fact that Verstappen was able to drive the wheels off the RB19 on tyres that were 40 laps old just goes to show one thing. The aerodynamics of Red Bull's 2023 Challenger are unmatched. So what's next at this point? You have a team, or more precisely a driver, that doesn't seem to be faced by anyone on the grid other than his teammate occasionally. This will result in the sport losing a massive amount of audience, and if this trend continues, Verstappen will be able to win the title with more than 6 or 7 races remaining on the calendar. A wild theory has suggested that Verstappen could win the title as early as in Zandvoort, a race that's supposed to happen in September, which would result in absolutely one of the most dominant and, unfortunately, boring seasons that the sport has witnessed. To add salt to the wound, apart from Perez's issues with his self-confidence and his inability to be consistent week after week, Mercedes has spoken about the new Imola upgrade, and it doesn't seem to be as competitive as they would want it to be. When talking about it, Wolff said that he wants to manage everybody's expectations, and while Hamilton hoped that the new design would bring him 1 second per lap, that doesn't seem to be the reality for the Silver Arrows. So while I am very much against it, it seems the only way Red Bull could be beaten is through tweaks to the regulations. However, this itself doesn't guarantee anything, as Red Bull survived 2 major tweaks against them, one in 2022 and one at the beginning of 2023, with the third one currently being survived and dominated by them as well, the shortening of DRS zones. At this point, it seems like Red Bull owns the entire Formula One world, and we are just living in it. But what does Hamilton think about the solution to this ongoing issue? When talking about it, the 7-time world champion said, "Last year for us was pretty bad with the bouncing, because you've got the turbulence and the bouncing, whereas this year we don't have the bouncing, so we have less issues following cars. I think it's still a little bit better than the previous generation of cars, but hasn't delivered everything that it said it would, so got some improvements to make hopefully for the future. I think it's good that we're trying new things. I think it's important that we continue to move forward and evolve. The technology has evolved. It is just unfortunate we still see the same sort of gaps between teams. I don't know what the solution is for the future, but I think we're going to have to continue to adapt these regulations moving forwards. Otherwise, it could be the same as it is now for years, until 2026, if we don't do a better job, which we're working on doing." With this in mind, there is still a lot ahead of us for the 2023 season, but it seems like Red Bull has already made everyone give up and focus on the upcoming season. This has probably been the saddest news every F1 fan, even Red Bull ones, could possibly get, and the popularity and revenue of the sport will definitely see a massive drop-off if this Red Bull trend continues to be present. It's up to Mercedes to boost their chances and up to Ferrari to show what they are made of, because if they don't step up, then the sport will definitely see one of its worst periods, and it will definitely not turn out well for every team out there not named Red Bull.